Hey guys, it's Mr. Mach, and today's lesson is I can graph from vertex form. Vertex form is a new concept to you guys. It is about, it's pretty much the same thing, not pretty much the same thing. You get vertex form by completing the square. Alright, vertex form comes from completing the square. And I gave us our first equation here, or our only equation for today in this example, I guess. And, let me make a note here. So vertex form comes from completing the square. Created, writing on this thing. Created by completing where's the I? Completing the square, that is not an S, square. Alright, these are going to get better. Alright, so we got to complete the square. Alright, so I gave us our example here. We have y equals x squared plus 4x plus 1. We can't factor that. So remember, we do completing the square for a couple reasons now. Number one is to solve it. When you can't factor it, you can solve an equation by completing the square. This one we cannot factor, so we would use completing the square to solve it. We are now connecting completing the square with graphing. Alright? So how this works, we have to go ahead and complete the square. So let's separate some things here. So we know that this is going to be y equals, and we're going to put the x squared plus 4x together, and then I'm going to leave a space. I'm going to put my plus 1, and then I have another space here, right? So completing the square, we're going to take that b. We're going to take 4, and we divide it by 2, and then square it. So 4 divided by 2 is 2, squared is 4. So we're going to add 4 here. Alright? Which means that when we can factor this part now to x plus 2 squared, right? And what we talked about yesterday or last week, sorry, is that we can't just simply add 4 to an equation. If we're adding 4 there, we now have to subtract 4 here. So 1 minus 4 is negative 3. Okay? So now we've completed the square, and this right here, that part that we're looking at now, is vertex form. This is vertex form. Oh, look how well that turned out. So that's vertex form. Okay? How do you use it to graph? Well, clearly, judging by the name of this form, we probably have the vertex someplace. Oh, clever. So what numbers do we have that could possibly form the vertex? Good question. So the vertex in this problem comes from the only 2 numbers that are in there. The vertex is, now that's a positive 2. I want you to think back to when we were graphing the absolute values. Just when it was in the absolute value, it was the opposite, right? So what does x have to be for that to be 0? X has to be negative 2. So the vertex is going to be at negative 2 and then the negative 3. Alright, so let's move over to our graph. Vertex is at x equals negative 2 and then negative 3, right? So that's going to be right, negative 2, 1, 2, 3. The vertex is right here. Alright? And now we have to think to ourselves, well, how do we get the rest of this? Well, when we graph the negative b over 2a, you found the vertex, and then you would go over 1, up 1, over 2, up 4, over 3, up 9, and it's the same process. And the only time that would change is if there were a number in the vertex form that was right here. Okay, and that would be your multiplier. So let's say it was 2. You'd go over 1 up 2, over 1 up 1, and then multiply that by 2. So that would be your multiplier. It'd be in this space here. All right, but we don't have a multiplier this time. Okay, so we're just simply going to go back to our graph, and it was over 1 up 1 here, and here, and here, over 2 up 4, over 2, square it, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right there. Corresponding part would be right there. And now we've graphed this quadratic, okay, using vertex form. Vertex form is a popular form in mathematics. It's used quite a bit once you get to your pre-calc classes as well. So going over it again, graphing from vertex form, you have to complete the square, and I did that here, right? We took the 4 divided by 2, squared it, got 2. We got our vertex form. The vertex then is -2, -3, because you use the numbers that are just right there in vertex form. And then it's the over 1 up 1, over 2 up 4. All right, guys? So that's completing the square. That's a vertex form to graph. And that connects, again, into why we complete the square. So A, you can complete the square to solve an equation you can't factor, a quadratic you can't factor. And B, you use completing the square to graph because it gives you vertex form. All right, guys, hope that helped.